Welcome to Veterans Preference in Hybrid Title 38 appointments. If you don't know me, my name is Omaira Bedward. I want to welcome you to this is the VISN A HRD training. And before we get started, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. This training is specifically targeted for HR employees. If you do not meet this criteria, this is your opportunity to log off at this time, and we're going to thank you for your interest, but it is only for HR employees. So we'll give you a second to log off. This training will be recorded, and your attendance is your consent for this recording. So I would like to introduce our VISN HRD team. Our HR development department is led by Marcus James, and our team is composed by Lisette Lima, Valerie McKinney, Samantha Montalvo, Angel Torres Morales, and myself, Omaira Bedward. If you ever need to contact us, please do so via our email group, visn8hrd@va.gov. These are the learning objectives for this class. We're going to just review the reference that apply to veterans preference for hybrid Title 38 appointments. Veterans preference as it applies to annual determination of staffing shortages, requirements for job opportunities, announcements, and the referral and selection process. And we're going to touch briefly on the objection or passover procedures. These are the references, and what I'm going to do is at the end of our presentation, I will share these on the chat for you to keep. This is an intermediate class, so I am assuming that you are all familiar with these, but I know that we can get lost sometimes trying to locate links and sections, and I myself had a bit of a challenge trying to find one of the resources. So I'll definitely share these on the chat just to make sure that that you have this at your fingertips. One thing that I always like to reiterate on all of my trainings is that always look up regulation, always look up references, don't go by memory. We go in and out of different regulations, Title 5, hybrids, Title 38, different scenarios. By speaking from experience, I have 14 years of experience in staffing alone. And I found that even when I thought I sometimes I would think, oh, I know this, I will go and check it and be, oh, hold on, let me take a step back. So I always encourage everyone to please go to the regulations first and always look at the entire picture. I find that that is half the job to ensure that you apply the correct guidance to the correct scenario at hand. Before we go into the topic of this class, I want to just take a look at what the regulation says. And I just took a snapshot of the actual handbook. I know this, but just in case there's anyone that is not familiar, is not at the same intermediate level, I like to make sure that we just go over it to cover it. So the regulation reads, this chapter contains administrative requirements and procedures relating to the application of veterans preference in making new appointments, and that's the keyword, new appointments to hybrid Title 38 occupations identified in 38 U.S.C. 7401, parenthesis 3. Okay? This section applies to both full-time permanent appointments, part-time, intermittent, time-limited appointments. And the reference, as you can see, is VA Handbook 5005, Part 1, Chapter 4. So let's go back to the basics. If we're going to apply veterans preference, we know that it has to be an eligible veteran, discharged or released from active duty under honorable or general conditions, and that they are also eligible under one of the preference categories. Those are your 0, your 5-point, 10-point preference. And veteran preference always applies to new appointments only. Veteran preference does not guarantee a job to a veteran, and it does not apply in internal agency actions such as promotions, transfers, reassignments, or reinstatements. And you can find that on the Vet Guide and on 5005, Chapter 3, Part 1, Chapter 3. I mentioned that already, but the only thing I want to mention regarding the eligibility is that last bullet, veterans opportunity to work eligibility. If you're not familiar with it, you want to get familiar. And basically it was done to provide eligibility for military members that are close to their release date, and they wanted it to give them also eligibility as a veteran. So you can look into that a little bit further. We're not going to cover that. We covered that under our previous class, the Veterans Preference class, but I just thought I mentioned it here as well. As we look at the DD-214, those that are not familiar with it, I've highlighted here the blocks that you want to take a look at when you're looking at a veteran, at the documentation a veteran submits. Obviously, you want to look at the character of service, which is block 24. That's the one very important one. The grade, you want to pay attention to the grade because the grade also, if they have retired from active military, if they're an 04 or above, veterans preference doesn't apply unless they are a disabled veteran. So those are the little things that you want to make sure that you take a look at. Excuse me. You look at their time in service, which is highlighted in block 12. You look at their ribbons, which you have to look at the Vet Guide Appendix A and B. And you want to look at the remarks because it'll also give you information while you are adjudicating. Okay. This is part of the basics. If they're service connected, they're going to provide a service connected letter. This is an example of one, but there's other types. Some have, they might look a little bit different, but they will have generally the same information, the branch that they were honorable or generally discharged, and their time that they serve. So since we're talking about hybrid Title 38 occupations, if in case you had not come across it or are familiar with it, there is an appendix that provides the list of all of the hybrid Title 38 positions. There's 77, and they all have qualification standards. And the appendixes for these are in 5005 Part 2. There's several. Actually, I'll probably include that at the bottom on the chat. I know there's several places that you can locate the list, and I was able to track a few of them down for you. So I will include that at the bottom, at the end of the class, on the different resources. But this is one place. That's what I'm saying. There's more than one. So one of the other items that we have to cover in this class is the annual determination of staffing shortages. And the application of veterans preference. I just want to ask real quick if you can tell me on the chat how familiar are you with this? Just a thumbs up or a thumbs down would suffice. I just want to see how familiar everyone is out there with this. I see only 2 thumbs up. Okay. 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 All right. So some are familiar with it. So I'm just gonna speak from the point that not everyone is familiar with it. So those that are, please bear with me. So the every year there's a list that's put together, and it is called the Annual Determination of Staffing Shortages. It's a list of, it's hard to recruit. And it's put out every year. It's done in a memo or in a bulletin. It used to be done in a HERMO, and I actually had a bit of a hard time trying to locate that because it was always a HERMO, and I couldn't find it as a HERMO, but I found it under the bulletins. So with that said, this is where you locate all the HERMOs and all the bulletins. You go to the Ochiko website, and under the library, you will find them there. I have the link that I will provide to you at the end of the class. But basically, this is just saying that there's a shortage and that these positions have been identified as hard to recruit. The current guidance is effective October 1st of this year, and it runs through September 30th, 2024, usually it's fiscal year. And the bulletin, what it says, and I figure I just read from it specifically, hybrid Title 38 occupations follow Title 5 veteran preference rules. That's based because of an MSBP case. And the 38 USC 74 12 waives the requirement to apply veteran preference to external applicants for appointments made to the short occupation list. Okay? So basically, if you recruit for any of these occupations, veteran preference doesn't apply. Now, these are the different positions that are on that list. I'm just going to say them out loud just in case. Biomedical engineers, DRTs, general engineers, MITs, medical supply aid and technicians, medical support assistants, medical technician, but there is a note on that one. So just make sure that if you're recruiting for that, you pay attention to the note. Medical technologists, nursing assistants, pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, practical nurses, psychologists, social workers. So veteran preference does not apply if you're recruiting externally for these, as they are on this annual determination staffing shortages. I just want to highlight that, and it was part of our training just to highlight this, but residents and trainees, they do have a specific, if they want to hire them, there's specific guidance for that. So if you are in the middle of that, just make sure that you look it up. I can't cover it here because it's its own guidance, but just to make sure that you're aware of it. VA residents, trainees, and candidates are people that have successfully completed or expected to complete a formal VA-sponsored training for specific hybrid Title 38 positions. So hybrid Title 38 positions have those flexibilities that you can hire them, and those have not changed. There's external announcements are not required to hire them. And qualified veteran preference candidates who have completed a VA residency trainee program for a hybrid Title 38 occupation who have been considered along with other qualified VA resident trainees must receive consideration when it's being externally is done as an external hire. You have to provide the veteran's preference they apply. So I thought that is very important when you're recruiting to know the area of consideration and the different definitions of applicants. I remember that sometimes between internal, you only thought that it was just the facility, but internal can also mean other things, right? So I figured let's just look it over very quickly. And I always reiterate, look at the entire picture. For external applicants, and this is a very important point, it means all U.S. citizens who are not federal employees. However, if you recruit an external announcement, right? You're doing an external announcement and you do a you include federal employees along with the U.S. citizen as the area of consideration. Um, Veteran preference doesn't apply. But if all U.S. citizens, um, it's for all U.S. citizens and federal employees who apply to the external announcements with the area of consideration of U.S. citizens only, then the veteran preference will apply. Okay, I hope I didn't mix that up. I hope I didn't confuse anyone. So that's a very important note, okay? External federal applicants is all of federal employees who apply for vacancies. Internal applicants is applicants at the facility, at the CBOX, and then VA nationwide applicants are all of the VA applicants employed by the VA, VHA, VBA, and CA, not located at the facility or the CBOX. So the announcements, JOAs. Each facility should consult their bargaining unit agreement to determine the area of consideration. That will be my first thing, right? To check. Hybrid Title 38 vacancies can be filled without posting a vacancy announcement. If there are veteran preference eligible applicants on file that were not solicited via an external announcement, the qualified veterans preference eligible must be considered before an external non-preference eligible applicant may be selected. The recruitment strategy is at the discretion of the servicing office and the selecting official. And announcements, obviously, they can be posted internally, externally, or both. I know that a veteran's preference, we mentioned it before, that it doesn't apply to internal, but let's just go over this. How do I announce for an internal? You must announce at all grade levels up to the full performance. Above the full performance and at the specific grade level cannot be targeted. And veteran preference does not apply to promotions, reassignments, change to lower grade, or transfers or internal announcements. This is the guidance, is the 5005, part 1, chapter 4, section, what is the section on this? It's 1, internal announcement requirements. So just know, if you're in doubt, just make sure that you go to the handbook and it'll tell you how you can recruit, okay? Internal employees, facilities, obviously look at the bargaining unit agreements. If internal facility employees can apply, may include current permanent federal employees from other agencies. And again, we reiterate that it doesn't apply veterans preference to internal promotions, reassignments, changes to lower grade, or transfers. So how do you send the referral list for an internal announcement? Again, there's the guidance specific that tells you what to do, and you do the internal applicants, VA nationwide, and other permanent federal agency applicants if applicable, but that's the order. So I figure I don't like to just read, but let's just do a quick practical exercise. Sorry, my throat is getting a little dry. This is just a quick scenario put together. Is for an internal announcement. The area of consideration is VISN 8 employees. The position is a medical records technician, GS 8. It's going to be announced at all grade levels, starts at the 4 up to the 8. The announcement closes. HR qualifies based on basic requirements. HR sends the referral to the hiring manager. What do you do? And if you can just, for the first one, for the internal applicants, if you can let me know if you would, you send several certificates follows for internal applicants at each grade level. Yes or no, if you can just give me a response on the chat. I just want to see what you would do. I'll give you a second because it's not a poll, just if you can type on the chat. So you qualify the applicants, you send a certificate, internal applicants at each grade. Thank you, Jamie. Yes. You send internal applicants at each grade. What about if you get veterans? Do you send a certificate with all the veterans at each grade? Very good. Only open to VISN. No to veterans preference because does not apply to internal announcements. And no, both of those are correct. How about this scenario? It's also an internal announcement. VISN is a medical records tech. You announce it at the full performance only. Announcement closes. HR qualifies based on basic requirements, send the referral to the manager based on the regulation that we just went over. If you can just analyze that real quick, think about it. Is there something that doesn't seem right? Something that seems right? Anybody else? I see Jamie says internal posting should be posted at all grade levels. Anybody else agrees with that? And that's correct. It should be at all grade levels, okay? All right, let's move on. So let's talk about now about external announcements. This is the guidance. Again, I like to do screenshots just because it puts it in perspective. And what the guidance says is, and I'm just going to read it here. Give me 1 second. The area of consideration includes all U.S. citizens or U.S. citizens and other current federal employees of other agencies. If the area of consideration is all U.S. citizens, veterans preference applies and should be specified in the job announcement. So I think that's very important. I'm not sure if that's done across the board, but very important note. Veteran preference does not apply for other current permanent federal agency employees as long as they are listed as part of the area of consideration. So if the announcement is open to U.S. citizens only, veterans preference applies. But if they say area of consideration is U.S. citizens and other current permanent federal employees, then the veteran preference does not apply to those federal employees. Okay. For external, must be announced at all grade levels from the entry to the full performance. It can be also announced only at the full performance. And above the full performance, the same thing, it cannot be targeted. Okay. I think we just covered, that was just a bit more of a breakdown. So I know this looks very busy, but the guidance, I kind of like to break it down, and this is how it works for me. So for an external referral list, if the position is at the full performance level or below, will be referred as follows. Search by grades, levels up to and including the full performance level. And then search of qualified applicants with veterans preference will be in the unranked order as below. And as you can see, let me see if I can highlight this over here. You can see here, obviously it shows you the veterans preference, the different categories. Okay, so just if in doubt, I know that we're just going over it quickly, but know that the regulation is there and it tells you exactly how you're going to refer them. Okay, if the position is above the full performance level, then you refer at that, and also with the veterans preference. And if the area of consideration includes current permanent employees of the agency, then separate list. And veteran preference does not apply. External referral list for professional scientific positions at the GS9 level and above must be referred in no numerical score. Unranked or preference eligibles will be considered together regardless of the type of preference, and then all other applicants. And just want you to know that there's an actual list in the handbook that shows what those positions are. It's right here on the screen. So just make sure that you go to the guidance and verify those positions, okay? And again, for positions other than professional and scientific and professional and science below the GS9 level, the selection must be made from the highest available preference category as long as there's at least 3 applicants remaining in that group. When fewer than 3 applicants remain in the highest category, consideration may be expanded to include the next category. Okay, so selections of qualified preference eligibles are an important source of external applicants and must receive full consideration while making external hiring decisions. Whether or not the vacancy was announced externally, when qualified preference eligible veterans are referred for vacancies, the provisions of this chapter apply. So the selecting official may make selections from any referral list at any grade level, and veteran preference applies at the grade level for which the selection is made. When making an external selection, a non-preference eligible applicant may not be selected over a qualified preference eligible applicant before first receiving approval to a pass over or an objection. In my experience, I don't know if this is very common now, but if you can just let me know on the chat, do you come across a lot of pass over requests or not? Nowadays, in my staffing time, this was something that managers always were interested in requesting, and many times it was just because they did not want to select a veteran. At least that's what they would say. But I'm not sure if times have changed. I hope they have. And I hope that you're not going through this process because it's actually a tedious process, the process of Passover. We'll briefly go over it. Veteran preference applies whether or not the vacancy was announced. The selecting official, like I said, they can select from any referral list, and we have to give them preference. Now, it's very important to keep your recruitment files and also to make sure, especially for the Passover and objection, you want to make sure that you have very good files of that detail, very specific, all approvals, etc. So once remember that external recruitment, when you're doing any external recruitment, you want to clear any veteran applicants files that you may have. Um, Obviously, we are responsible for qualifying the applicants. It's not the service. That's an HR role. And you have to document in at least two ways. If somebody declines, if somebody turns down the interview or is no longer interested, make sure that you have documentation of that. I used to make sure that on the USA Staffing, a new hire applicant file, I would ensure that I would write notes galore, date, time, reason why, when I talked, who I talked to, what they said. I called them this date at this time, no response. I called them this day at this time, zero response, no voicemail, unable, very specific. So, all right, this is just about the external. Let's see, we just have one scenario on this one. If you want to come off mute on this one and just say what you think instead of typing of this scenario, but let's take a look at it. For an external announcement, the area of consideration is U.S. citizens and current permanent federal agency employees. The position is a DRT at the GSA, announced at all grade levels up to the 8, from the 5 to the 8. The announcement closes. HR qualifies based on basic requirements. HR sends referral list to the hiring manager. What are the things that jump out of this scenario regarding the application of veteran preference? If you want to come off mute, that will be great. Think about what we just talked, US citizens, but it's also naming federal agency employees. So those veteran preference apply. The area of consideration is U.S. citizens, but it also mentions current permanent federal agency employees. So any federal employee that applies will not receive veterans preference. If it was only U.S. citizens, then the veteran preference will apply. How about the position? It was a DRT. I don't know if I read through it quickly, but do you remember if it was on that annual determination of staffing shortages? So what that tells us is that better preference does not apply, correct? So it would be one certificate, multiple certificates, veteran certificates. How many certificates? I know I'm putting you guys on the spot. All right, so it would be multiple certificates, right, at each grade level. And obviously, we're not going to give them veteran preference to those that are federal employees. Okay? All right, let's move on. So, quick question. Hybrid Title 38 vacancies must be announced on a USA staffing announcement. Is that true or false? If you could just put it on your chat. I got two answers. False, false. Correct. That's false. Yeah, it is required to follow Title V Veterans Preference rules when hiring individuals for hybrid Title 38 positions. Is that true or false? It's a quiet group today. Very good. Yeah, that's true. Yes, and that was because of an MSPB, I'm sorry, interpretation that said that they have to. So the answer is true. So let's just go quickly. I know this looks a little bit busy, but I thought it was a good table for objection and passovers. I thought it had a pretty easy to read breakdown. Um, just know that with the objection and passover, we're not going to be able to cover step by step each page for this because we will be here beyond our time and we're kind of running up to the end of our class. But I figure we'll just go over this one very quickly. I'll give you the references. You need when you if you receive or if a manager wants to do a passover, I suggest that you go and you open the handbook and you do it step by step as how it is on the handbook, okay? There's 4 categories. One is 30%, disabled or more. If the veteran is less than 30%, if they wanted, if the manager wants to do the passover or objection because of a medical or physical condition, or if they want to do it based on a suitability. If you look across that first block of the pinkish, the darker pinkish, they all have to be adjudicated by someone. The 30% or more is by OPM. The less than 30 is by HR. Um, and then the other two, they go to a higher level. So you have to make sure that you go and you follow the guidance specifically that is in the handbook. And that guidance, you're going to find it in VA 5005, Part 1, Chapter 4, and it's paragraph 10, paragraph 11, and paragraph 12, the ones that cover all of these, okay? And it is also here at the bottom. Maybe I'll send you guys also this little chart. I don't know if you guys have it or not, but I thought it was a good visual. Just quickly, preference eligibles that is less than 30, again, must be adjudicated by the HR. Um, and again, there's a lot more details on the actual paragraph that addresses this. So I encourage you to go and look at it carefully. This is something that you don't want to rush, because all of these must be done, and the documentation must be as if OPM is going to adjudicate them. So make sure that you take your time, you're not rushed, you're not forced to do something that you don't agree with. This is where you take your time, you analyze it, and you follow the guidance in the handbook. For the preference eligibles, that is 30% or more, again, must be adjudicated by OPM. The due date of the referral list must be extended. If there's a request to an objection or a pass over, the vacancy cannot be filled, and again, must follow the procedure in paragraph 10 of this chapter. If there's more than one vacancy that they're filling, they can fill those, but they must keep one vacancy not filled for that person that they're trying to pass over. Now, it's very important that again, I'll go through this very quickly. The passover request that is based on medical and physical, again, must be adjudicated by OPM, and that one is very specific. So you have to go through the entire paragraph to see how the manager has to provide the justification. Okay. And the last one is the suitability. And again, there's also specifics about it. I grabbed a few here. Servicing HR office, they have to consult with the Office of Operations, Personnel Security and Suitability, the PSSS, in order for them to submit this passover or objection. Okay, so just know that there's very specific and detailed processes for these. There was something I wanted to mention and it escaped my mind. Let me see if I have it on my notes. Give me 1 second. Okay, it'll come to me. So in Appendix E, are grounds for objections or pass over requests. These are all of them. I again encourage you to go to the handbook and review this if you have to come across this, or if a manager would like to request a pass over. One very important thing. Um, oh, I'm gonna skip over that, but there's appendixes in the part 1 that gives you specific guidance for the grounds of objection and passover request. And there's a checklist for the 30% or more. Okay. Now, if the manager is requesting a passover, there's a sample notification letter for the veteran that you have to notify. Okay. They can just request it and just, hope that they do the passover and the veteran doesn't know anything. They have to be notified. And there's a sample letter that you can use to do this. It's important to treat every request as if it's going to be adjudicated by OPM. HR leadership is required to document a decision in a formal memo for record that states whether the request is approved or denied and the basis for the approval or the denial. The justification documentation should be the same as the documentation submitted for the 30% disabled veteran and maintained in the facility case file. We are almost done. When you audit the certificates, make sure that veteran's preference is appropriate, is applied correctly, that your documentation of any declinations, withdrawals, not able to contact is part of the record. And that's pretty much it. We made it. Our summary includes we reviewed the veteran's preference, where the references for veterans preference for hybrid Title 38 appointments. We briefly reviewed the annual determination of staffing shortages, the job announcements, referral process, selection, and objection and pass over procedure. If there's any questions, now is the time to ask. You can do so, ask your questions, and I will give you a minute if anybody wants to come off mute. If there's no questions, or if you want to type them here, if you want to send them to me separately, we could do that as well. If there's no questions, I don't want to hold you any longer. If you have a VA phone or tablet, you can scan this and you can do our survey. If you would help us with that, it doesn't work with your regular phone, so do not try to do it with your phone because it's not going to work. It has to be a VA device. So, with that said, I thank you so much for joining us today. In case you want to just hang out for a minute, but I found this quote and I thought I'd share it. I'm an encourager by nature, so don't lose hope. I know you guys are working super hard in HR, in all the different HR areas. And I found this quote and I thought I'd share it. Start by doing what's necessary, then you do what's possible, and suddenly you will be doing the impossible. So I hope you have a fantastic day. Have a great Thanksgiving. And I want to encourage you to keep moving forward, keep doing what you're doing. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Always reach out to others. Sometimes we need to talk it out before we make the decision on something. And that's part I think of HR. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm here if you have any questions, and have a fantastic day.